let's say the Army, the military, okay, whichever division you want. Do these people that are actually pulling the triggers on the battlefields, do they know what's going on? And if they did, would they be actually fighting?
Well, that's a good question, Jay, and I appreciate your call. It's a mixed bag. Some are awake, some aren't. It's our job to reach out to them and inform them and go over these facts with them. It's our job to get the general public to realize this country's in trouble. There's a foreign offshore banking takeover taking place, and it's a life and death situation for this country if this information get out. We're going to come back, continue with your calls, get into CIA narcotics trafficking on the other side. Please stay with us. Hi, folks. This is Alex Jones, and I want to tell you about the Silver Lungs generator. Now you can produce pure and endless colloidal silver and deliver the solution directly into the bloodstream by breathing the solution through the lungs. The respiratory system is the first line of defense for airborne pathogens and viruses. The Silver Lungs generator infuses the respiratory system with your self-produced nano-silver solutions and also delivers the silver nanoparticles instantly into the bloodstream. With continued legislation threatening the sale of nano-silver products, you can now produce pure and endless colloidal silver with the Silver Lungs generator. Very easy to follow, step-by-step instructions are provided, making production fast and simple. Go to www.silverlungs.com today and learn more about the breakthrough technology of the Silver Lungs generator. That's www.silverlungs.com.
The Genesis Communications Radio Network proudly presents The Alex Jones Show, because there's a war on for your mind.
There is a private worldwide banking takeover happening. These banks create tens of trillions of dollars of fiat imaginary currency. And all they've got to do is buy off our governments to get them to accept it, and they achieve global domination. It's like Ken Lay or Bernie Madoff to the next power. And, of course, we've been telling you for several years, well, actually more than a decade, but several years intensely, that Goldman Sachs and others, J.P. Morgan and others, are engineering a financial collapse. It's now come out in Congress last week that the internal emails that indeed it was engineered. They knew it was going to happen. They told their investors to invest in it. They knew what they were doing, and that they planned to destroy their competition through that crisis. So we're going to be covering that coming up after I cover this story. Now, I hate to talk about something like this without engaging in several hours of on-air preparation, going over all the evidence. I mean, you read about CIA aircraft crashing full of pure cocaine in Reuters. You see the congressional reports in 1996 where the CIA Solicitor General admitted that the CIA was responsible for the crack cocaine epidemic in the 1980s and early 1990s. And I've interviewed, of course, one of their chief dealers, Freeway Ricky Ross, and others here live on air. That is part of the public record. But this particular case deals with more than just government drug dealing. It reveals the program of mind control. I talked about 6-8 months ago hearing BBC radio on XM and almost running off the road. I actually started to pull off to the side. I couldn't believe I was hearing this. I mean, I knew this, but the fact that the system would get to a point of where they came out in the open and just admitted the truth was incredible. But they did it because their activities are so public now that all they can do is hide in plain sight. It's a psychological tactic they use. And on that BBC radio report, they said, well, the Taliban and al-Qaeda will take over Afghanistan because they'll be more popular with the people if the U.S. and British forces don't protect the opium and help the tribes ship it out to market. Now, pre-9/11, the Taliban, the real Taliban, not the CIA Taliban, was almost letting no opium out of the country. It was in single digits, the amount of global production that was coming out. It was less than 10%. Fast forward 8 years later, 8.5 years later, and more than 90% of global opium pouring into Europe, pouring into China, pouring into Asia, pouring into the United States, pouring into Japan, pouring into Africa, pouring into Latin America. It's admitted that most of it, 90+%, is coming out of Afghanistan, one little country where these poppies tend to grow very, very easily. Now, I've covered Reuters with the headline, NATO rebuffs Russia's call for eradicating poppies, and the New York Times headline where they came out and said, yes, the U.S. is protecting opium production. That's all come out in the last few months. And so they're normalizing this. I remember talking to Pat Tillman's brother, who was also in Afghanistan, and he was sending letters home, the NFL star, saying, look, I joined up to fight terrorists. We're protecting opium. This war is a fraud. I'm going to come back and speak out against this war. The people only knew. And then he got fragged. He got assassinated. And the Army covered that up, and then it came out that they had indeed killed him. That's the Army reports. He was killed up close and by friendly fire. But then I see Geraldo Rivera and Fox News do a piece with an Army commander at a base, and they say, oh, it's just this one village. We've taken it over, but we've got a problem. If we destroy their fields, they're not going to be our friends. And so we're even helping them grow it. You're about to hear and see this right now. We're going to help them grow it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you study the U.S. history, in 1834, the British East India Company came in, this is mainstream ABC News, and they set up Skull and Bones as a private intelligence agency with the wealthiest children of the elite at Yale. And it was to run opium into the U.S. and to gain control of the U.S. government, to set up tariffs against other companies that were shipping in opium, later turned into heroin in the 1860s when they developed that system of purifying it. Because this was one of the biggest industries in the United States. Snake oil salesmen, they mainly sold opium. You got a headache, you're depressed, you got a toothache, drink this, you'll feel fine. And so the CIA, out of the OSS, in the late 1940s, set up the CIA almost exclusively out of Yale graduates. That's covered in the film The Good Shepherd that Robert Duvall directed and produced. The point is, this is mainline history that I'm giving you here today. But to have them just calmly come out and say, this commander doesn't like it, but it's what he's got to do to beat the terrorist. We are shipping in the drugs. We are producing the drugs. And so we've gone from them denying it to saying, yeah, we help grow it and ship it, but if you get caught using it, we're going to put you in prison for 30 years. So here is the Fox News clip. We'll go to break. I'll come back and analyze this, but we've got an article breaking it down. Fox News makes excuse for CIA, Afghan opium cultivation. It's the same thing with cocaine. It's the same thing with many other illegal drugs. And you've got the same big corporations pushing synthetic drugs like Prozac, Ritalin, and others that are even more dangerous. Look, drugs are a big business. And when you make them illegal or by prescription, it jacks up the price. That's why government keeps them illegal. You want to cut off the Taliban and Al-Qaeda as if they're the ones producing the drugs. Why don't you decriminalize? Well, then that gets rid of the black market. It gets rid of the mystique. It gets rid of the profit. Our government's run by banks, and they're the biggest money launderers on earth, and they're shipping the smack in. Here it is.
Biggest obstacles in front of the U.S. troops there in Afghanistan is the opium trade. The Taliban is using it to intimidate the population.
Yeah. Joining us from Helmand Province is Geraldo Rivera. Good morning to you, Geraldo. Tell us what you've seen during your days there in Afghanistan.
Hi, Allison, Dave, and Clayton. Yes, in some ways, the Marines' brilliantly executed invasion of Marja, this town in the middle of Helmand Province, was the easy part. The hard part now is governing this province, a province, as you suggest, that has become addicted to opium in many, many ways. That is the principal crop that is being grown here. The Taliban lend the farmers the money. They are indebted to the Taliban. They have to grow the opium. Now the Marines, in their success, are in a sense a victim of their success, because now the population is, They have these opium fields, and we are tolerating it. We are tolerating the cultivation of the opium because we know that if we were to destroy it now, the population would turn against the Marines, and it would be a real security risk. Let me introduce Lieutenant Colonel Brian Christmas. He's the commanding officer of the 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines. Really a wonderful group of Marines here. I know that you care deeply about this contradiction, the fact that here you have one of the best fighting forces in the world ever mounted, and in a sense you're watching as this opium is being grown. I know it grinds at your gut. How do you deal with it? What are you doing about it?
Well, frankly, this is a part of their culture. So while it might grind in my gut, it's what they do. We provide them security, we're providing them resources, and we're providing them alternatives. And the alternatives are different crops to grow. They're getting the seed and the fertilizer to do it. They can rotate any of their crops that they want. If they want to get rid of their